Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. For someone who would make his career playing one of the most anonymous positions in sports on the offensive line, Tim Grunhard certainly has been anything but anonymous, particularly here in Kansas City. Raised the son of a Chicago policeman with an older brother who played professional baseball for almost a decade in the minor leagues, he also was a fine baseball player. But as high school was winding down, he switched to becoming an offensive lineman and a football player almost exclusively, which eventually would lead him to Notre Dame, a national championship, a number 2 selection, second-round selection for the Kansas City Chiefs, to become a center, a position he really had never played in college, and on to a decade-long career in the National Football League. His big frame and big personality has been a big part of Kansas City for almost 30 years now, as he moved from football into radio even while he was playing. More in radio, a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, and a lot of fun. Tim Grunhard is a lot of fun, and he has been a great part of the Kansas City community for a long, long time now. Let's find out more about Tim Grunhard. Coming up next on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. We're here with Joe Spiker, the president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you worked for other companies in the construction industry. What inspired you to start your own company in Easton Roofing?
Well, you know, Danny, when you are working for somebody else, you oftentimes don't get to see the project through from beginning to end, and you don't get the final control over the customer experience. And I wanted to build a place where people can come and get work done on their house and not have to worry about being treated the wrong way and get a good customer service experience start to finish.
The company slogan is "Where Integrity Matters." Why is that so particularly important to you?
Well, for us, what that means is treating each other with respect at work, treating our clients with respect, and making the right choice, especially when no one's looking. So when you're presented all the time as a contractor with choices that have to be made, are you going to make more money on this if you cut a corner? And we just wanted to make a place and a slogan that said to our people and to whoever is our customer, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the right choice regardless of profit.
Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. Sumner One is the company to make your office maximize efficiency. Their family of companies make up one of the largest independent dealers of office technology in the Midwest. They are proud to bring the best service and technology to top companies across the region. Sumner One can help your organization run more smoothly than ever. Sumner One printers, copiers, MFPs, managed print services, document management, infrastructure design, IT services, disaster recovery, and business continuity. Welcome to the one place where everything works. For more information, call Carl Little at 913-752-2256. Looking for a truly unique escape from your normal entertainment or corporate team-building regimen? Stay tuned for an exclusive offer only for Reasonably Irreverent listeners. I'm excited to tell you about an extraordinary destination, the Exit Room, located in the heart of beautiful downtown Lee Summit. The Exit Room is a distinctive entertainment option that offers a cool alternative to the normal couples night out, family get-togethers, and corporate team-building events. The Exit Room is a one-of-a-kind boutique escape room catering to special occasions and corporate team-building events and is unmatched in the Kansas City metro. With 5 individually designed and varied escape room adventures, your party or employees can unplug from their electronic world, interact with one another, match wits, and ultimately escape the humdrum of the ordinary. The Exit Room adventures cross decades and centuries and create fascinating fun. I know the owners well. They are local folks, their staff is warm and friendly, their lobby is inviting and beautiful, and their adventures are award-winning. Check online. There are over 1,000 reviews, and note that they are a rare 5-star ranked business. Visit their website and Facebook page, and any of my listeners who books online at theexitroomkc.com using the promo code Clinkscale19 gets 10% off any ticket purchase. The Exit Room in Lee Summit. Unplug, interact, and escape. Tim, let's start off and get the stuff out of the way. That Tim is a very important person in my life.
That's right.
He was an owner of O'Dowd's, and O'Dowd's was the place where my wife and I had our first date, and it's also the place that I proposed to her. But I'll also ask you, do you remember what your gift was for my wedding?
Do I remember the gift for your wedding? I do not remember the gift for your wedding.
I would expect you wouldn't.
But I do know that we have a plaque up at the exact spot that you proposed to your wife at O'Dowd's. So that was kind of my gift to you. Always a remembrance at O'Dowd's, Danny's wedding
proposal there.
Yep.
Yeah, well, actually, the reason I brought it up, you got me grilling utensils, some of which I still use to this day. Yes,
okay.
Yes, indeed.
All
Yes,
right.
indeed. So with that out of the way, let's talk
I'm glad
about...
I didn't get you the candlesticks then.
With that out of the way, let's talk about Tim Grunhard. And you grew up in Illinois. Tell me about your hometown near Chicago.
I grew up in Chicago. My father was a Chicago policeman, so we had to live in the city. And I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago in a little area called Beverly. Each little neighborhood in Chicago has a name to it. And grew up in the Beverly area, which was a lot of policemen, firemen, city workers, people that were kind of mandated to live in the city. So really nice neighborhood, great little parks, great youth sports, great schools. Very blessed to have had an opportunity to grow up in Chicago.
Was there any stress involved when you were a youngster in the knowledge that your dad was a policeman?
Yeah, because I always knew I couldn't get away with anything. So,
Not that your dad might be in peril, just that you were in peril.
I was in peril. Now, obviously a policeman's a dangerous thing. He was a violent crimes detective, which was CSI before CSI was cool. So you would see on the news certain stories, and he would say, I'm kind of investigating that. And, you'd always have a little apprehension of the danger that he was involved with. But, he was a very good policeman. I thought he was a very fair policeman. My mother was a nurse, so we figured if he ever shot somebody, the nurse would patch him up. So we'd be okay that way. But
he never did get shot or have anything like that.
No, never had any real major issues. But a lot of big cases, a lot of big cases that were solved, and I thought it was really interesting that going through the whole process of you going to a crime scene and then working the clues and working the facts and going in the neighborhoods. And back then in Chicago, the neighborhoods, a lot of neighborhood people would really rally around the police and help the police with to get the bad guys off the street, and don't seem to have that dynamics too much anymore.
No, it probably is the case, and it's probably what was it like living in a neighborhood with a lot of professionals like that, firefighters, and policemen and things like that?
The blue collar kind of the values, hard work, putting in many hours in the city, and also politics. Politics in Chicago is a big thing, so. You always, remember the aldermen and the aldermen's helpers and everybody else kind of going to all the block parties and going to all the houses and knocking on doors and trying to tell everybody who to vote for, which I thought was very interesting. They would give you a piece of paper and say, okay, these are the guys you're going to vote for. So, Chicago politics. But it was a lot of fun. But like you said, it was one of those things where you always knew that there was somebody there that if you ever had any problems or any issues that you can always fall back on those people.
You have a brother who's 4 years your senior. What was that relationship like? And was he a bit of an inspiration for you, or what was that? You're a little, 4 years is enough different than you're not like buddies, but.
Yeah, you would think that he would be an inspiration, but the one thing that my father, I think the mistake that he didn't make is that he made my brother and I very competitive against each other. My brother was a baseball player and actually played for the California Angels and Oakland A's all the way up through AAA and went to Northwestern. So he was 4 years ahead. So there was always a lot of pressure and a lot of, comparing, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? So, my brother and I get along. We could have probably gotten along a lot better if we didn't have that. I don't blame my father. I think that was the only way he knew how to do it. So we were very, very competitive with each other, and kind of bled into our relationships. But he's a great guy. He's got a great family. He lives down in Atlanta now. But, in baseball, I believe he was in the minor leagues for 9 years.
Right.
And that was basically when I was at Notre Dame, and then first couple of years in the NFL. That's and that's hard because you're in AA, you're in AAA, you're taking buses, and maybe 5,000 people at a game, and then you fast forward to the late fall when they're done with baseball and they come to a Chiefs game where there's 90,000 people, or a Notre Dame game where there's 70,000 people, and it's all excitement. So there was always a little bit of a not jealousy, but just a little bit. I wish I could have done more.
So you mentioned that. So he was achieving ahead of you, basically, and your father was using him to say, hey, he did that, you need to do that.
Yeah.
Was there friction involved in that?
Oh, yeah, there was. There was friction. And my mom tried to be kind of the referee of the whole deal. But, yeah, I mean, it was friction between both of us. And I supported and went out to many of his minor league games, and he obviously came to a lot of the Notre Dame games. But, kind of always in the background and always kind of bubbling underneath the surface, there was a little bit of competitiveness and maybe even a little bit of jealousy that would flow through, and that was the unfortunate thing. And my father, towards when he passed away at an early age of like 55 years old, but he did say one of the biggest mistakes he made is
sort of
pitting two kids against each other, and I think he thought it was a positive. I'm gonna get both of them to live up to the highest ability they have, but it also caused some issues. And I learned that with my own kids. All my kids were very, very competitive, and we never, and that was one of the things we always do, never compared, or we never challenged one of the kids to live up to the other.
You when did you see that you had some aptitude in sports? Your brother is excelling, obviously. You've become a professional baseball player, but at what age and in what sport, maybe first, did you see that you had some aptitude?
Well, baseball was my sport.
Right.
I was a very, very good baseball player. Football, I was okay. I wasn't one of the kids who were freshmen or sophomore brought up to the varsity level. I was, when I really started coming into my own, my end of my junior year in high school and into my senior year, which nowadays is too late.
Right.
With recruiting the way it is, and which I think is unfortunate, because a lot of people kind of blossom and bloom in their senior year in high school. You do a lot of growing. I grew 3 or 4 inches and put on about 30 or 40 pounds in between my junior and senior year. So, I wasn't highly recruited. There was a bunch of guys that were highly recruited from my high school. I was offered a scholarship from Lou Holstead, Minnesota.
Right. And
Jerry Faust from Notre Dame did not offer me. And the other guys that he offered from my high school ended up going there or going there and then not finishing. But so I was kind of the throw-in. I was the last guy to get a scholarship from Lou Holtz to Notre Dame, and he kind of carried that over from Minnesota. So, yeah, but baseball was my love, my sport. I was very good at it, and but I had kind of my senior year, after putting on the size and knowing that I had an opportunity to get a Division I scholarship, I kind of decided, hey, I better focus in on this a little bit.
Was that difficult for you? I mean, you're a catcher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Catcher or first baseman, right?
But, you talk to a lot of athletes, many of whom say they like basketball the best, but a lot of times the sport they're playing isn't their favorite. And what was that like for you to sort of give that up just for practical reasons?
It was tough to give up. I still am a huge baseball fan and watch probably almost every Cub game that's on during the year, and catch most of the Royal games too. So I love to watch baseball. I enjoy baseball. And a lot of people, I think, this generation don't understand that game, that they could sit there for 3 hours and there's not as much action. But I just love the strategy and the that batter going up to the plate and being personally responsible for what happens in his game. And you miss that in football. You're an offensive lineman. You're part of that five guys, and you may be able to miss a block, but you can kind of get away with it. But in baseball, you're up there and you're batting and you strike out in a key situation, or you get a hit in a key situation. You have the instant rewards of that.
Right. When tell me about the final recruiting aspect of it. Were you're a Catholic kid growing up in Chicago. I mean, Notre Dame's the thing, mm-hmm. But it appeared that maybe you were going to go to Minnesota, and maybe that dream wasn't going to be realized. So how did it end up working out with Lou coming over to Notre Dame?
Well, when Lou came over to Notre Dame, he called and said, "Hey, listen, we're going to carry a scholarship over to Notre Dame from Minnesota. We'd like you to take a visit." And you're exactly right. There were only 2 teams in Chicago at football, and it was the Chicago Bears and Notre Dame. That was the 2 teams. So, that was but I was hurt. I felt like that. I was a huge Notre Dame fan. I felt that I had scholarships from schools like Texas and Nebraska and most of the Big 8 schools back then and most of the Big 10 schools, but Notre Dame didn't offer me a scholarship, and I was a little bit hurt by that. It was took it a little personal. And when Lou Holtz came over and offered the scholarship, I said, "Yeah, I'll go on a visit," but I was still hurt. And
right.
my parents said, "This is your decision. You make up your own mind, but we're going to go with you on the visit." And I'll never forget, they went out Friday night with all the coaches to a place called Pat's Pub, which is a famous indoctrination place for parents. They bring them to, and it's all the Notre Dame fight song. They play it every 20 minutes, and they have all the historical trinkets and all that kind of stuff there. So the parents they get a real good dose of it. So the next morning, I walked down for breakfast, and they said, "Well, so when are you committing to Notre Dame?" I said, "Well, I thought this was my decision." But I knew pretty much after the first night that you can't carry those hard feelings. A whole different staff, whole different situation, and pretty much the next week I committed to go to Notre Dame.
I wanted to flash back a little bit. What was it like being a teenager, a high school guy? You're an athlete. You're a good one. What was high school life like for you?
Well, it's funny because, like I said, I kind of grew through high school. I wrestled at 167 my freshman year in high school. Right. I wasn't that big, so I kind of was. I played baseball. I wrestled. I played football, obviously. So I stayed busy with the sports and the athletics at the school. But not until really going into my junior and senior years when people kind of realized, hey, this guy's got an opportunity to use sports as a vehicle to go to college. And but I just like I wasn't in college. My roommate was in the band. I didn't really room with the football players. I didn't really run with the football players. I had a really good friend of mine who was actually hard of hearing, almost deaf, that he was my best friend, and I used to pick him up for school and hung out with him most of the time. And he wasn't the most popular kid in the school because obviously, he couldn't communicate as well. But, so I always kind of gravitated towards, and I'm not saying that I'm the creme de la creme, but I always kind of gravitate towards the underdog. I kind of always hung around with or roomed with people that kind of away from the sport. And I really think that became a valuable asset for me as I got into the real world outside of sports.
Notre Dame was maybe the last previous time when Notre Dame was really great. I mean, and you would end up winning a national championship. What were the pressures like there? What was the competitiveness in you trying to get on the football field and play?
Yeah, I kind of, there's kind of a funny story there too. I was a long snapper in high school, and we lost a varsity game 2-0 because I snapped the ball over the punter's head through the end zone for a safety. So one of my coaches, Coach Dulac, every day at lunch from that point on would grab a football, a little rubber Voigt football. You remember the old Voigt rubber footballs? And we go out in the parking lot during recess. You have lunch for 20 minutes. You have 20 minutes of just kind of milling around out in the parking lot or out in the schoolyard. And he would take a football and he'd say, "Okay, we're snapping until I get 15 perfect snaps. You got to, continue to do it." And then all the kids would come around and watch. So it'd be a little nerve wracking. You'd be sitting there snapping the ball. But I became very, very good at long snapping. So when I went to Notre Dame, my freshman year, I traveled and played because I was a long snapper. Well, the great thing was if you're there at the game, one of the things Lou Holtz wanted to do is get the young guys in all the time because he knew there was a building process. So I played a bunch my freshman year because I was there, because I was there as a long snapper. Right. So they needed somebody else to go in. So I think I played right tackle, which, I never even played in high school and never played, obviously, in the NFL, but I was at right tackle. And I'll never forget playing against, we were down in Alabama, playing Alabama in Birmingham in the old Iron Bowl or whatever they call it. And Cornelius Bennett, they call it the sack. I mean, it's actually a painting that they sell in sports stores and in art stores in Alabama of Cornelius Bennett basically cutting Steve Berline in half. I mean, it was a sack, the ball flying in the air. The very next play, they put me in. So, I'm like, oh, my gosh.
You're the play after the sack.
Yeah, I'm the play after the sack. And I remember getting in there and saying, "Oh my gosh, this guy's so much better than I was." And I basically tried to grab him or cut him or do whatever I possibly could. So I think they ran all the other plays away from me, so I didn't have to worry about too much. But yeah, so I was lucky. It was one of those things. I've always kind of, in my high school career and in my college career and in my NFL career, kind of fell into good situations. I was a long snapper, and so that got me on the field. And then halfway through my sophomore year, I started as a guard, and then junior and senior year, obviously, as part. But I also still long snap. And then when I came to Kansas City, Mike Webster was here as a center and didn't want to play anymore.
Right.
So he's basically told me, "Hey kid, you got to get up to speed here because I don't want to play." So I kind of fell into good situations. I've always been kind of at the right place at the right time.
Well, speaking of falling into good situations, you would play as a freshman football player because of your long snapping ability, but your freshman year is also when you met your wife.
Absolutely.
Tell me about that.
Well, I had a friend of mine, a girl who kind of grew up in the neighborhood. Her father was a policeman, and she was at Notre Dame, and she was having a little get-together after a game, and I went to the get-together, and I almost didn't go. I was tired, and I was like, I'm just going to kind of hang out in the dorm here, and I went over and ran into Sarah Harrington from New Jersey, and fell in love. I mean, just one of those things where that this is a person for you. But the next morning, and this is one of my favorite stories, and she laughs about it all the time. So I get up in the morning, typical football player. I got my sweatpants on, a T-shirt on, hat on, low, going over on a Sunday morning to go get some breakfast over at the cafeteria. And I'm walking down the quad, and some girl goes, "Hey, Tim." And I just kind of did the, "Hey, how you doing?" And I kept walking. And it was Sarah. And she's like, "That guy's the biggest jerk of all time."
There he was being nice to me last
night. He was as nice. And it actually worked out well because I think it kind of sparked her interest. Like, wow, this guy's hard to get here. So I probably would have fell down and on the ground if I would have known it was her. But so then, we started to date a little bit towards Christmas of our freshman year, and then dated all the way through, and dated 7 years basically until my third year in the NFL. And she came out here in the middle of the third year and kind of helped set some things up. And next thing you know, we were married and had 4 kids.
I'll get back to the college career, but so after college, did you separate for a little while?
Yeah, she went to Chicago, of all places. I left Chicago. She worked for Gen Re, an insurance company that's under the Berkshire Hathaway brand, and she did a great job. And then she came here after she quit that job and started working on her MBA at UMKC and got pregnant. And then the next thing you know, she kind of walked away from that, but she was going to continue to do that line of work. She was really good at it.
So in the end, how did that romance work its way toward marriage after college sort of put a little, the post-college put a little interruption into it?
Yeah, I always knew that, for me, stability, a person that is going to continue to challenge you and make you try to make the best decisions in your life. Not that you always do, and not that this has always been perfect. But I knew that I kind of always wanted to have somebody that knew me before, I made the NFL or made any money, or I was just a lowly long snapper. Not that they're lowly, sorry Kendall, but I was just a long snapper that got in a couple plays a game, and she seemed to fall in love with that person, and I knew that she loved me for me and not for what what you are. And too many times you see this situation where guys meet gals, and listen, I understand that it works, but it's tough because they marry you for that being a professional athlete, and then it ends. So a lot of guys they're not playing in the NFL anymore, and it kind of loses that little you got to fall in love with the person and not the job. It just like I tell kids when I was recruiting at Kansas, don't commit for the coach, commit for the school.
Right.
And too many times kids are committing for the coach, committing for the football program, or commit for whatever sport they're in, but they realize that sport can be taken away at any time. And now you're at the school. You have to commit. You have to love the school that you're going to, and you can't worry about that sport. And it's the same thing. You can't love the job. You got to love the person.
When you Notre Dame obviously would end up winning a national championship. Talk about that journey and give me a Lou Holtz story or two.
Well, the journey was awesome. So I'll never. So getting kind of back into the recruiting process, so Lou Holtz had only 2 or 3 months to put together a recruiting class, and did a pretty good job of getting some guys in. But we thought we were pretty cool that they were coming off of losing a really a bad game to Miami, and Jerry Faust gets fired, and the team and the program is kind of in the dumps. So we get in and we think, here are the saviors. This is the class. We're Lou Holtz's first class. We're going to start this whole new beginning. And so we go to the very first meeting, and Lou walks in and tells everybody, sit up, put your feet underneath the chair, and no slouching, get your pens and pencils out. And he goes, by the way, I want all the guys that I recruited to please stand up. So we're feeling pretty good about ourselves, and we stand up and we think, okay, here it goes. He's going to tell us, these are the guys I'm building this program around. These are the guys that I think are the difference makers, and this is the future. And he proceeds to say, if I had one more month, none of your asses would have been here. So we all looked around at each other and sat down, and we knew that, hey, listen, we were getting no special favors to be in that first recruiting class. But we ended up that class being the junior class and winning the national championship, and most of those guys played. But yeah, we definitely were set back in our place. But it was a great run. We started off 5-6 with a team that was kind of learning how to win, and then we went to the Cotton Bowl. We were 8-4. We lost to a good Texas A&M team, which was actually a good experience because we got there, we got to the big game, we had to learn how to win it. And then the next year, we lost a bunch of guys. It was basically, I think I was the most experienced offensive lineman with 4 starts or 5 starts going into that season. And we were ranked like 28th or 29th and worked our way all the way up to winning a national championship that year, which was great. And then the senior year, I think we won 11 games in a row and then lost down to Miami 20-10 or 20-17 or something like that down in Miami. And then ended up beating the number 1 team. We were number 3, which was Colorado, and then Miami jumped up and won the national championship. So, but we had a very, very successful couple of years towards the end.
So you came very close to winning 2 national championships.
I wonder. You often wonder how that would have worked out with the new system, who would have played what, and how that would have worked out. But yeah, that was a special time.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
There's no need to get a case of the Mondays every week, not during football season anyway. Hey, this is Matt Llewellyn from the 23rd Street Brewery, and we are the place for Monday Night Football. Food and drink specials every week, and all new televisions always at 23rd Street Brewery. The hardest thing about Mondays now will be getting through the workday, although waking up on Tuesdays might be a little bit tough. But remember, watch all the Chiefs games, NFL games, every game at the 23rd Street Brewery.
Before you spend your time and money going after an MBA, ask yourself why. Is it so you can tell people you got your MBA? So you can add a line to your CV? So you can call it a CV instead of a resume? Truth is, any MBA will do that. On the other hand, if your goal is to learn how to successfully manage and grow a business with real-world insights from experienced professionals, well, consider getting your MBA from Park University. Our low student-to-teacher ratio gives you personalized attention, and our face-to-face and online classes offered in 8-week terms are designed with working professionals like you in mind. No wonder the Kansas City Business Journal ranks Park University as the top MBA program in the area. Classes begin June 10th at all 4 KC area locations: Parkville, Downtown, Independence, and Lenexa. Visit park.edu to get started.
I was duped, and I recommend you be next. For better or worse, the ultra-realistic impression of me sits now in my wife's office to spook her on a daily basis. So what is Doob? D-O-O-B. It's the keepsake of a lifetime, a 3D-generated, incredibly lifelike figurine. 66 cameras take an image at exactly the same moment in any pose, and state-of-the-art 3D technology transforms that into exact replicas of you, anyone you know or love, a pet, whomever is close to your heart. Create lifetime memories with a Doob. Visit their Facebook page at Doob 3D Kansas City, or better yet, see their incredible creations. Visit their location down on the plaza in the heart of it at 231 West 47th Street in KC Mo. Doob, be next.
For many people, a family law case will be one of the most difficult experiences in their life. The law firm of Kenneth McRae will help you through it. Personal and effective help from Ken in concert with you will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McRaeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765.
Our guest is Tim Grunhard as we talk to you on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing on Danny Clinkscale's reasonably irreverent commentary. And let's get into the transition to professional football. Great career at Notre Dame, capped with 2 fantastic seasons, successful as a team. When the season ends, when the college career ends, what are your thought processes? What being told to you? What were the expectations of where you might be picked? Things like that.
Oh, yeah, that's just another interesting story because, I was a guard that was being projected as a center. So most of the GMs and offensive line coaches and head coaches around the NFL weren't quite sure what I was. So it was weird. I was ranked as low as the 8th round. Remember, there were 12 rounds back then.
Right.
And as high as like the 4th or 5th round. So, went and worked out for a couple teams, Washington Redskins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then I was flown out to San Francisco. And Bob McKittrick was the offensive line coach, and Seifert, I believe, was the head coach, and Walsh, I believe, was the GM at the time. So met with those guys, and at the very end and I was one of about 6 or 7 offensive linemen who were in there. And most of the other offensive linemen were in there, like Richmond Webb and guys like that were first-round guys, and I was kind of just, and Keith Sims, or I believe that was his name, another offensive lineman. And I was kind of, that guy that was the highest fifth or 6th round. So I was like, it's great to be here, but I'm not sure what I'm doing here. So then we get to the last meeting, and Bob McKittrick says, we're going to take you in the first round. And I looked at him, and he said, yeah, we like the way you play. We like, the person you are. We like that you're a smart football player. We need a center. Jesse Sepulveda is getting older, and we want a guy to come in here and play center. I was like, this is great. So, of course, I get on the payphone. We didn't have cell phones back then. Call my mom and dad and say, yeah, I'm going to get drafted to the 49ers. And they were excited about it, but they knew there was going to be a challenge for them to get all the way out to San Francisco to watch football games and, whether they were going to be able to see a bunch of games or not. So let me rewind real quick. Every summer, my father, like I said, was a Chicago policeman. So in the summer, he would take what they call a furlough, which was about 6 weeks off. And he would take all his 6 weeks off in the summer, and we would go down to Lake of the Ozarks, down to Bull Shoals Lake, or down to Lake Norfolk or the White River, and we kind of grew up in the summers basically for about 10 or 15 years in Missouri and Arkansas.
Wow.
So let's fast forward to draft day. I'm sitting in my house I grew up in. It wasn't at any fancy draft parties or wasn't at any big-time New York draft show. So I get a phone call from the 49ers, and they say, yeah, hi, this is, I think it was Coach Walsh or one of his minions. So they just want to make sure this is the number, and, we're counting on picking you last pick in the first round. They're coming off the Super Bowl. I'm like, yeah, this is it. We're here. We're ready to go. And so, you're sitting there through the draft, and it was a long, I think 30 picks. It was 30 teams. And the pick comes up, and I don't get a phone call. And it's the 49ers have picked Dexter Carter from Florida State, a speedy receiver. So right after the pick, within 10 or 15 minutes, the 49ers call us. We didn't realize that Dexter would fall to this spot. And I think they knew in the background, we can get this guy in the second round. So they said, we're going to still take you in the second round. We just apologize. But, one of those things, a business decision, blah, blah. Hey, fine. I was still, 4th or 5th or 6th round is where I was. So the phone rings about an hour later, and it's Carl Peterson. And he says, Tim Grunhard, Carl Peterson from the Kansas City Chiefs. We just selected you with the 40th pick in the 1990 draft. And I was like, oh, okay. And, they talked to Marty and then talked to Howard Mudd, and was all excited. And then, Marty's brother, Kurt Schottenheimer, was with us at Notre Dame my freshman year. So I talked to Kurt real quick, and he said, hey, we're getting back together. And I hung up the phone, and it's God as my witness. I turned to Sarah, and I said, now, where is Kansas City?
So even the fact that you had gone to the Ozarks and everything.
We knew it was up here somewhere, but I still don't know. Is it in Kansas or Missouri?
Right,
I don't know.
Right, exactly.
So no, we were laughing about that, and, looked at the map, and, okay, here's how far it is from Chicago to Kansas City, and so, 2 days later, I'm on a plane and come in here for the Redcoaters draft summary party. They used to have a dinner, and I'm sitting there and I'm walking around. I think the first place that brought me was Gates Barbecue on the Friday night, and then Saturday was the dinner. And it was a very nice experience. It was great, but next thing I know, I'm living right by the stadium off of Northern Avenue, over 43rd Northern Avenue, pretty close to the stadium over there, and I'm a Kansas City, and I have never looked back.
What was the signing process?
Once again, of course, the Grunhard thing has got to be a disaster, confusing, or just simply out of the ordinary. So Carl Peterson calls me, and Carl was famous for going on vacation right before training camp. I don't know if you remember this, Danny, but he would always go on vacation for a couple of weeks, and it was not only for vacation for him to get away, but pressure on those agents. If you don't sign before this vacation, then you're going to be late and you're not going to come in.
Right.
So he calls me in and sits me down at his desk and starts talking to me about, we really want to get you in. We think you have an opportunity to play. Mike Webster, I want to play. This is a guy that, the quicker you get in, you make sure you get all your agent. And he slides his contract across it. This is kind of where we see you at. And I look at it well, I'd like to get a little bit more here, a little bit more there. I says, okay, we could probably do that. And at that point, he goes, well, to call your agent. So I call my agent. He goes, what are you doing? He said, don't be in there negotiating your own contract. That's my job. So I'm so I'm this catch-22 where I felt like I'm so smart I could negotiate my own contract, but I wasn't smart. It was Carl was hoodwinking me a little bit. And but make a long story short, the agent got a little bit more, and I'm thinking, what do I need this agent for? I could have done this myself, and I'm paying him 3% or 4%, whatever it was. So
he got more, but it all went to him.
Yeah, but he was none too happy with me, and so I learned but I was never really a free agent. I never really became. I always re-upped kind of halfway through contracts, and I always wanted to be here. But the signing deal was weird too. Once again, just a typical, unconventional Grunhard thing.
What kind of money was it?
Yeah, it was signing bonus was, in the mid-2s, and I think the first year was right around the same thing. It's nothing compared to what they get nowadays. It's amazing the contract these guys get nowadays. But, I often, think back to when I was signing those contracts.
Right.
Guys like Ed Buddy and those guys, and good buddies of mine now, they were like, I can't believe you guys are getting paid that kind of money. So it's all part of it. And, when you come from, I took my signing bonus and I gave it to my dad, and I said, here, Dad, I want you to invest this, because he always would mess around with investments. And he invested in Walmart pretty early, so it actually worked out pretty well.
Oh, so mid-2s, you mean your signing bonus was $2 million something?
No, 200,000. $2 million.
That's what I thought when
you
said
mid-2s.
Said mid-2s, I just wanted to clarify for the audience.
200,000.
That's more what I thought.
Yeah.
But if you invested in Walmart, you were doing just fine.
Yeah.
So you mentioned first of all, I just was curious, why were you projected almost immediately not to play guard but to play center?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think maybe they thought my size being 6'2.5" that it was a better fit measurables for center. I do think that because I was in a kind of an offense that really took a little bit more studying and a little bit more kind of being a student of the game, that they thought I could probably carry over to the next level. So, yeah, I don't know. All of a sudden I walked into the locker room and Howard Mudd gave me a football and said, hey, go over and take a couple snaps with Steve DeBerg. And first of all, I'm looking around, I'm like, which one's Steve DeBerg? and somebody pointed, I go, that's that old guy over there, Steve DeBerg? I thought he was a coach. So I walk over and I said, I think I even said, Mr. DeBerg, Howard wants me to do a couple snaps. So he looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? I goes, I've never played center. I'm going out to the first minicamp practice without ever really snapping the football. He goes, all right. So we took 2 snaps. Oh, you're good. So I had 2 snaps before my first minicamp practice. So that was a little nerve-wracking. I do remember in my mind's eye my very first snap with the Kansas City Chiefs at minicamp. I remember that snap as if it was yesterday because it was really stamped into my memory of, oh, my gosh, all of a sudden I'm a center in the NFL, and I'm responsible for this football, which is really important. So it was stamped into my memory.
But you got to play right away and would go on to obviously play almost every game that you possibly could. Yeah. What was it like being a rookie? How did at that point in time, in the early 90s, whatever, how was a rookie treated?
It was they didn't treat us that great. There was a little bit of hazing and that kind of stuff. But you know what? Like I said, I had Mike Webster. He was he was my mentor and kind of took me under his wing. So I didn't get a lot of the wrath because everybody was afraid of Mike. And so I would go to Mike's house for Thanksgiving, or I'd go to Mike's house to watch the Monday Night Football game and kind of hang out with his family. So they were a little bit more lenient on me because of Mike. But it was tough. You had the whole thing where you went and got the turkeys at Thanksgiving. And
right.
The whole, I shouldn't say that because you never know if they're listening. But there was all kinds of little things that, you had to bring breakfast every morning for the not every morning, but every Saturday morning for the veterans, and bring a lunch on the plane. But, yeah, it was just all part of the process.
Mike Webster would have a tragic story to the end of his life. Did you have any sense of that, or the difficulties he was having at that point in time? Because he really said he didn't want to play football anymore or wasn't physically capable of it. Did you have a sense that maybe this would head in the wrong direction?
Yeah, we had a little bit of a sense when he came back. Carl Peterson brought Mike back as kind of an assistant to the assistant head offensive line coach, and he was living basically over in the sports complex over there by the weight room. He had a little room in there, so we knew there were some issues that he was going through, and you could tell, he was always kind of grabbing at a couple pills here or there and popping
right.
pills, and we thought maybe he was just doing it for pain or it was aspirin, but we didn't know exactly what it was. But whether the movie Concussion or not is a fair representation of what happened to Mike after that, we had no idea, and I wish I did. I often feel bad because he was such a great mentor to me, and I had no idea he was going through
right.
those things, and would have loved to have been able to help him out.
You came to the Chiefs just as they were emerging as Kansas City's sensation. I don't think people – well, I do think Kansas City sports fans can understand it because we just went through it with the Royals, a team that had just sucked for a long time and then becomes good. That's a special time for any franchise. I think it's happening again just because of Patrick Mahomes. But there's nothing like a fan base that has just been beaten down that suddenly has all this success. What was that like?
It was exciting because it kind of felt like a college atmosphere.
Right.
The Arrowhead. I'll never forget I think I really recognized and kind of started to appreciate how crazy it was for that Monday night game against Buffalo, where it was so loud and it was so crazy, and the crowd noise affected the game so much that I was like, wow, this is really something special. And then, being able to take advantage of kind of that hot streak that the Chiefs were going through, both on and off the field, by doing some radio stuff and doing a show at the Levee for 101 The Fox, and that became kind of a cult deal where the players would love to go to it and the fans would line up at noon to get into it, and it was always fun that Thursday kind of pep rally with all the fans, and I feel bad for the kids nowadays. I call them kids because they are kids to us, Danny.
Right.
They're just young kids, but I feel bad for these guys nowadays for a couple of reasons. Number one, I do think that most of them would really like to kind of get involved and be involved in the community like we were, but it's almost impossible now with social media and cameras and everything else that you whatever you're doing, one click of the camera and one post on social media and it's all over the world basically, and so you lose a little bit of that trust value. We did. I thought that the players were very, very open to the fans in the 90s, and the fans were very protective of the players. I'm not sure if it's that way anymore.
Yeah, your time with the Chiefs was a very successful time. But obviously there was a lot of disappointment, too. Mm-hmm. You had one great run to the AFC Championship game, but there were some bitter playoff losses as well. How difficult was that to sort of never quite climb the mountain?
It was difficult because, I felt like out of the 9 out of the 11 years that we made the playoffs, I thought about 6 or 7 of them we really had an opportunity to go ahead and go to a Super Bowl, and we just didn't take advantage of it. Think about why that was, and whether it was, and Marty kind of beat us up so much during the year with practices and the way we kind of conducted our game plans that everybody was kind of beat up by the end and, maybe fell off a little bit. The whole Marty thing with, that, couldn't win that playoff game, even though we said that had no bearing on what happened. I think in the back of your mind, because listen, I coached at Kansas, and you'd have guys prepared for games and you'd be all ready. But I think the kids in the back of their mind at that point, maybe even now to this day, wait for something bad to happen.
Right.
And I think we were waiting for something bad to happen. And I read a book. It's actually a golf book, and I can't remember the exact title of the book, but the guy talks about you go up to that first tee and you think about all the bad things that can happen. It's probably going to happen. But if you go up there and you just say, listen, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to lace this one right down the middle, and I'm not going to worry about, the tree over there or the water over there or the sand over there. I'm not going to worry about all the pitfalls. I'm just going to go ahead and go about doing my business. And then you should be okay. And I think we worried about all the pitfalls. I think when the playoffs started, that talk always creeped in. And it wasn't the media, it wasn't the fans, it wasn't the players' fault. It was just it. It was it.
Right.
It was there, and it's still there a little bit.
Right.
As good as the Chiefs, played last year, you got a guy who lines up off sides after, and there's an interception.
Right.
So to get the kind of proverbial monkey off the back of this team, they're going to have to go ahead and get to the Super Bowl. I'm not saying they have to win it, but they got to get to the Super Bowl. I think once they get there, the floodgates will open.
Right.
But there's a psychological barrier right now in this organization. I mean, you haven't won a Super Bowl since, 1970?
That's right. Yep.
So it's been a long time.
What was it like playing under Marty? You mentioned that he drove you hard, but he was a great leader, clearly, the gleam and all that stuff. But give me the pros and cons of Marty.
The pros really outweigh the cons. Listen, he was a genuine person. He cared about you. I give you the example of my father passing away my rookie year, and I went into his office and Marty, I got to go. My mom just called. My dad's kind of on his deathbed. He was living down in Mountain Home, Arkansas, and he did about as much possible to get a plane to fly me down there, and it just couldn't pull it off that quickly. I said, Marty, I'll be able to drive down. But when I was walking out of that room, and the pure just care and concern, and you knew that he felt my pain, that I said, I'll run through a wall for this guy for the rest of my career. And I did, and Marty was very emotional. I'm an emotional guy, and so I liked it. I liked his emotions. I like when people wear their emotions on their sleeves. I like when people are honest with themselves. I think honest with their emotions, and Marty certainly was. But I also think that Marty had some flaws. I think that he pressed in big games, and I think he kind of, instead of just kind of letting it flow and doing the things that we usually did in games, I think he overhyped or put pressure on the game that maybe he didn't have to do. But I think that's just part of trying to find a way to win, and I think it snowballed on his teams.
Well, this one might be more fun. How about Carl Peterson? What was your relationship like with him?
Carl, you know what? Up and down. Carl never really liked me doing radio, especially after, and listen, you know as well as I do. We worked for 810 and WHB for many years together, and I did some stuff for some other radio stations too. And you got to be honest. You can't just be a homer all the time.
Right.
You can't. I mean, so he would get upset when I would say things that he didn't agree with, and he felt that it was kind of
disloyal.
Disloyal is a good word for it. Yep. Yeah. So I think during the playing career was good, and then after the playing career, there was a couple of times when we had some knockout dragouts, and there's some things that he did and some of the people in his organization did that I didn't agree with, and not that he particularly cared what I thought, but he cared what I said on the radio. And so that was but now when he comes back, we get along really well. So, ebbed and flowed, but mostly good.
You played 11 years. You played almost every game. Talk about the transition to not playing. And, I think in your case, you felt like maybe physically you were, but still you weren't. You could have played a little bit more. What was that process?
Yeah, it was tough. I knew, Lou Holtz used to say all the time when it came to playing in a game or, getting ready for a game, if you miss one day, you know it. You know what your flaws are. You miss 2 days, the coach knows it. Coach kind of knows what your flaws are and what your weaknesses are. If you miss 3 days, everybody knows it. And I kind of wanted to get out while I knew it. I knew that I couldn't do some of the things that I was able to do just a couple years earlier. I knew that if I went out there and played at the next couple of years, that I wouldn't be able to play at the level that I like to play at. And so I knew it was time to go. I wish I would have probably stayed a couple more years. I think I probably could have, but I just felt at that point that it just wasn't worth it. I had knee issues and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so when you're done playing, I was lucky enough that I was able to kind of get into the radio gig a little bit and kind of stay involved. But yeah, you lose that adrenaline rush, and and I think part of the problem with guys that retire, they're always looking for that rush, and a lot of guys will turn to things that they probably shouldn't turn to, whether it's drugs or alcohol or those kind of things, because they're trying to find and fill that gap of that adrenaline rush that you have by playing, and that could be a challenge. And thank God I had a wife and a family that was here for me to help me get through that. But yeah, I think most people that's one of the problems. And when you talk to guys, especially the first 4 or 5 years out, it's a great challenge for them to make sure they're making good decisions. You
referenced the film Concussion, and you played center, so I mean you're banging your head a lot, play after play after play. Has the revealing of the knowledge as time has gone along made you think about it more, or did you even think about things like that when you were playing or shortly after, and has it had any effect? Luckily, it seems like it hasn't.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously there's effects that, you wonder, is it aging or is it just, was it from football? So there are some certain things, mood swings, memory, those kind of things, but I think most people have those anyways, but you can always fit those into a category or criteria. But, I think that the main thing that you have to do when it comes to, like you said, the movie Concussion and everything else is, players know, and this is kind of what Andrew Luck made his decision. Players know that there's a certain time and there's a certain play and there's a certain second that listen, if I continue to do this, it's going to be an issue. Like for me, it was about my third year in the NFL. I knew if I continued to play, it was going to have an effect later on. I knew that, with knees and with shoulders and with arthritis and everything else, I knew, okay, listen, I got to make a conscious decision. Do I want to continue my career and play knowing that on the back end I'm going to pay for it?
Right.
Or do I want to, go ahead and get out of here and know that I'm going to be healthy and not have any issues? Well, I didn't have the financial or the, anything that I felt I could fall back on at that point. So I said, I'm going to continue my career. And 90% of the guys do that. Because nowadays, though, after 4 or 5 years of playing, these guys are making generational money.
Right.
So you're going to see more guys like this
right.
who have made enough money to be comfortable the rest of their life, and they're going to have to come up and make that decision. If I continue to play, this is going to affect me on the back end more and more as I go. Do I want to live like that? And I think they look at examples of players in my age and older and some of the issues they've had with opioids and drugs and alcohol and CTE stuff and all the effects of that. And I think that they really look at it and say, weigh the pros and cons. And if they have enough money, you're going to see more guys done playing in 5 or 6 years than you ever had before.
You've raised 4 children. They're all very athletic and accomplished. One of your sons does play football still. Mm-hmm. Would you ever have thought at any point in time to not recommend that he play football?
No, because I think that they have to make that decision. And for Colin, who's playing right now at Notre Dame,
Yep.
and he's second team, which is fine with me. Everybody says, "Don't you want to be first team?" Like, no, not really. I don't want to see him getting beat up all the time. And he's on the team, he's enjoying it, and he gets to play 5 or 6 games a year, maybe 10 or 15, 20 plays, and that's fine. So, but no, you know what? I think your personalities, like my oldest son, CJ, who he played football through high school, but he had opportunities to go ahead and play in college and those kinds of things. He didn't want to do it. He just didn't feel like it was something that he felt was important. So they make their own decisions, and you really can't dictate to them. You can give them advice, and you can tell them how it affected you or didn't affect you, but they have to make those decisions. But the funny thing is, I tell people this all the time. I was out in the backyard with my boys, playing catch, snapping the football, throwing the football around, playing basketball, doing all these things, coaching their teams, doing all these things. And then the girls, they were kind of in the house here playing with dolls and, hanging out with Sarah, cooking and doing those things. Well, the boys didn't get any scholarship. The girls did. So my advice to guys is, don't worry about it. I mean, it is what it is. Both of the girls got scholarships to go ahead and swim, and Kaylee got a really great scholarship at Notre Dame, and Cassie got a good scholarship to SLU to swim, and they love it. Swimming, anybody who's ever been around it or has done it, is such a demanding sport. It is so hard. They practice, and their seasons never end. So it takes a lot mentally to do what they do, but they're pretty focused and that's their social life. That's who they are. They're swimmers. So I think it's going to be a challenge for them also when swimming ends to find something to kind of fill that gap.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the different dynamic. It sounds like you basically weren't involved in their athletic career that much except for rooting, and it's kind of a different deal. Yeah,
I learned really quick that trying to motivate a swimmer doesn't work.
It's a self-motivation
It's a
sport.
self-motivating deal. That win-win for the Gipper speech that you could give to your football players and your baseball players and that kind of stuff doesn't work on swimmers. But yeah, it's very self-motivating. They have to want to do it. You cannot make a kid get up at 5:30 in the morning and go swim in a cold pool. You can't do it. You can't make them do it. And so, yeah, I learned. I'm swim dad. I sit in the stands, and I've learned. All you swim parents out there, the more you scream at your kids in the pool, they can't hear you. All right, they can't hear you. So, and the harder they try, the slower they go, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a weird dynamic. You can't make them try harder to go faster because it doesn't work that way. One of my favorite things, and I love this, and I hear it all the time, Little League games when a pitcher's up there pitching, and some dad's yelling, "Hey, throw strikes!" What do you think he's trying to do?
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
He's trying to throw strikes. I mean, you're just making him more nervous by saying that, and he's probably not going to. Well, the same thing's with swimming. Swim parents. I mean, you the more you try to motivate, and the more you try to get on them, and the more you try to say, hey, do this or that, it slows you down. They've got to swim.
It's a technique sport.
It's a technique sport. They've got to be on their technique. It doesn't matter how hard you try. They can be trying really hard and going really slow. So I've learned that. So I learned to just keep my mouth quiet.
You seem to be in a very good place as a person. That through your life and your transition away from football, things have kind of. You mentioned that you have often fallen into a good place in your life, be it Notre Dame or getting the long snapper opportunity, Mike Webster not wanting to play. It seems like that's carried on.
It really has. I thought my 30s, once I got done playing, was a bad time. I don't know if it was because I didn't have not really discipline, inner discipline, but I didn't have responsibilities. I didn't have to be somewhere at a certain time, and I didn't have everybody watching over. And, you learn from that experience. And so I thought the 30s were a challenge for me, just kind of getting through the 30s and knowing that your career is over, that you worked so hard for, and that you've always wanted to do in football is over. And then the 40s, you learn to kind of channel that and enjoy your family, enjoy your kids, and not live vicariously through. But support them and drive them to their basketball and their baseball and their swim football practices and all those kind of things. And then I think when I went to Kansas, which I thought was probably not the best decision I ever made, because most of these coaches that start coaching in college football start in their 20s, and they're used to that schedule. When you start to try to do it at 45 years old, when you've never done it before, and you're putting 18 hours and you're out recruiting, doing all these kind of things. So at that point, I said, listen, I'm missing a bunch of stuff with my family. I'm living in Lawrence, Kansas, and my family's living in Kansas City. My kids are playing high school sports, and I can't enjoy that. I can't watch that. I think I learned at that point that, listen, there's a lot more things that are important than your initial wants or needs. There's other people. And that's how I've lived from that point. It was a great experience for me. And everybody says, well, Charlie Weiss this, Charlie Weiss that. I don't hate Charlie Weiss. I love Charlie Weiss. I think Charlie Weiss, I like him. But Charlie Weiss, he gave me an opportunity, but I couldn't work for the guy. He was a miserable person to work for. And I told him that. I said, listen, Charlie, I like being your friend more than your employee. And Charlie is a very, very difficult person to deal with, and he's very egotistical, and he's got his issues, but he's got a big heart. You got to know him. But I couldn't work for him, and I learned that listen. Like Lou Holtz used to say all the time, is your wife happy? Yes. Are your kids happy? Yes. Then don't mess with happy. And I messed with happy. My kids were happy. I was happy. And I thought, I'll try this. This would be great. I always kind of wanted to. You can't just dabble into being a college football coach. It's not. It's got to be your primary living. You can't have other options, because if you are, then you're thinking, what the heck am I doing? It was right. That was a very, very tough time. But I learned from that, and I'm in a much better place now than I was before, and that transition of learning about the important things in life really helped out.
And looking forward, what you got some things you like to do? You're soon to be an empty nester. What kind of things are you looking forward to as Tim Grunhard grows a little older?
It's a good question. I'll never rule out going back into coaching. I don't think I'd ever go back into college coaching. I may go back into high school coaching once my kids are done with all their sports. I don't think I'd ever want to be a head coach again. I've had that. I've done that. I don't need my ego stroked. I don't need people telling me how great or whatever of a coach you are. Those kind of things. I really like when I went back to Miege for the last 4 years after I was done with Kansas. I enjoyed being the assistant offensive line. I like being an offensive line coach. I like running the run game stuff. I enjoyed that. I didn't have to deal with administration. I had to deal with parents. I had to deal with any of that kind of stuff. So I may go back and be an assistant coach somewhere and help out kids and try to spread my knowledge to them so they can use football as a vehicle to go ahead and get an education, or to go ahead and use football as a vehicle to go ahead and maybe be a professional football player. I think I owe that to the sport. I owe that to these kids. But I'll just continue to do radio. Danny, I love sharing knowledge, and love, as you do, and love, critiquing and breaking down and talking the X's and O's with people and trying to give them a different look at what they're watching. So I enjoy. I'll probably continue to do radio. And, I started with this company, CBD, American Shaman, which I really and truly believe in CBD. I think it's a great product. It comes from the hemp plant, and it's really good for arthritis and anxiety and stress and circulation and all those kind of things. I think it's really important. And one of the things that kind of my goal is, and I've already met with this group, is the Retired NFL Football Players Association, and trying to have players exposed to and use CBD products and get off of opioids. Right. Because look what happened to Mike Webster. I couldn't help Mike Webster back then, but if I can help people from not becoming Mike Webster now by helping them with another alternative to the opioids, even the over-the-counter stuff, that maybe can help me to kind of get over that I wasn't able to help Mike.
Well, as we tape this, we fit it in before your workouts, or you're still active that way. Mm-hmm. What kind of things do you like to do?
Love to golf. Love traveling. Love going. Sarah and I will leave on Thursday afternoons and drive to South Bend. We love that, and we know that's going to come to an end. But we like to travel. We like to go and enjoy different places, and we very rarely go to the same place. So we like to travel. And
what are some of your favorites?
That's a good question. We like Mexico. We like the Caymans. But in the United States, gosh, we've been up to Maine. We've been down to Florida. We've been over to Oregon. We've been down to Arizona, and everywhere kind of in between. I think one of the things that we started the kind of this national park thing with the girls last summer, and they really enjoyed it, and I loved it too. So I think that's one of the things that we'll do is we'll try to hit a bunch of the national parks. Never been to Yellowstone, never been to Glacier, those kind of. We went to Redwood and went to Yosemite and loved it. Went up into Oregon, loved it. So that's probably what we'll end up doing. No RVs though. We're not going to be RVing. No tents, nothing. We're going to find the 4- and 5-star hotels and stay in those.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.